Welcome to the Extra Literary Affairs podcast. We provide fiction reviews for the lit, curious reader, because why not try a little of everything? Our scholarish approach and cozy book club atmosphere makes literature accessible to everyone. Whether you're a casual reader or a devoted bookworm, join us on our literary journey to explore all genres. Hello, and welcome back to Extra Literary Affairs. I'm Joey, and today Jennifer and I will be having an affair with Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah and his short story, Friday Black, which is the titular story of his debut short story collection published in 2018. And this was also featured in Esquire magazine, so if you're a subscriber to that publication, you should give it a read. Otherwise, you have to buy the collection. Before we begin, and I give you a brief summary, let me just give you a brief bio. He was raised in Spring Valley, New York, and he now lives in the Bronx. His debut collection, Friday Black, was a New York Times bestseller. It won the Penn Gene Stein Book Award and the William Sorian International Prize for Writing, and was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle John Leonard Award and the Dylan Thomas Prize. And his first novel, Chain Gang All-Stars, was a finalist for the National Book Award for Fiction, shortlisted for the Waterstones Debut Fiction Prize, and the Books Are My Bag Award, and selected as New York Times Top 10 Books of the Year. He is also a National Book Foundation's 5 Under 35 honoree. Before we give our impressions, I'll give a little bit of a summary here, which is a little bit longer. We're doing a little bit longer summaries. So, at Prominent Mall, the narrator, a seasoned employee, navigates the chaos of his fourth Black Friday. Tasked with managing the frenzied crowd, he aims to win the Super Shell coat, a prize for top sales, to gift his mother. Richard, another employee, is anxious about meeting targets, while new hire Duo struggles to adapt. The store is a battleground as customers flood in, pushing and clawing for whole-face TM product. Amid the madness, the narrator remains composed, expertly handling demands and tossing items to appease the crowd. He witnesses disturbing scenes, including a woman harming a child for a jacket, yet stays focused on sales, already amassing impressive earnings. During his break, the narrator encounters Duo, overwhelmed by the carnage in the denim section. The aftermath of the shopping frenzy is evident: exhausted shoppers, bloodstains, and scattered merchandise. Reflecting on the strained family ties and past Black Fridays, the narrator recalls outlasting competitors like Wendy who tried to sabotage him. At the food court, he meets a woman he helped earlier, now clutching a TV box, her sanity frayed. She recounts trampling death, embodying the toll of consumerism. Returning to the story, the narrator diffuses a violent confrontation over the Super Shell parka, saving Angela from harm. As another wave of shoppers descends, he climbs atop his cabin, ready to manage the rush. Despite the chaos, he smiles, embracing the madness of Black Friday with practiced ease. Well, now we have all of our backgrounds. So, Jennifer, why don't you start with your initial impression?
Joey, I loved this story. I love this story so much. I'm really happy that you brought this new author to my attention. I love that he is a younger person. I love that I have never encountered his works before. Your summary was beautiful, but oh my gosh, it is missing so much. The beauty of the writing in its simplicity and just dark humor. I was laughing out loud at some of these things. It reminded me so much of a George Saunders type story because you kind of understand what's going on. You're like, I know what Black Friday's about. I know what working in retail is. And then you're like, oh, right. And there's a girl in a pink jacket with a boot print on her back because someone has literally stomped on her in this rush of consumerism. So the reason I bring that up right now is that his writing style for me, and he is a young person, and George Saunders is a less young person, that he feels like he has had some influence from George Saunders' writing style, or perhaps just finds this subverting expectations of what a story is like is his style. So I was very happy to hear, Joey, all of the awards this person has won for his writing. So it's not just us going, oh, this is so good. It's like, yes, experts also agree this is so, so good. And I know there are a lot of topics that we will be discussing, but my first initial impression is thank you so much for writing this story, sir. And thank you so much to Joey for bringing this to my attention because it was really sad, poignant, super funny, really creepy. Loved it.
It's funny that you say it reminds you of George Saunders because it definitely reminds me of George Saunders, but he also blurbed the book. He said it's an excitement and a wonder. Also, Roxane Gay said, read this book. So if those two authors, especially Roxane Gay, give their sign off, I'm in. He also went to Syracuse University, where I believe George Saunders teaches. So maybe he was one of his students. That would not be a coincidence.
Thank you so much, Joey, for giving me that tidbit because, like, aha, of course, if he went to Syracuse University and George Saunders wrote a blurb in his book, he is swimming around in that universe. So good on him. So, the
Mhm.
specific George Saunders story that this reminded me of that you and I discussed is Ghoul, because he sets us up right in the beginning of this very odd otherworldly experience that seems kind of normal, but you know right away it's not. There's something terribly wrong going on here. So I just really thought this was unfolding, I'm like, this is Ghoul.
Yeah, I thought of actually the Simplica Girl Diaries, and I'm gonna fact check myself. George Saunders is in fact one of his professors, and he became a mentor to this author. So there is a lot of connections to George Saunders, and it really shows. I'm not saying he copied his style. These feel very different. George Saunders does a very different thing, but they do have very unique authorial voices that are distinct. Like if you read one of Adeji-Brenyah's stories, you are going to realize that that's his story now that he has a two books out. And I will say, now that I can give my initial impressions, that I am currently reading Chain Gang All Stars, which is his debut novel, and it's fantastic, and I love it. And there's so much to talk about it in that. I wish we could talk about a full length book one time, but yeah, it's about the prison system, and it's just like it's very George Saunders in that he takes a serious topic and then makes it like extravagant and fantastical, so that you are sort of tricked into read not tricked into reading it, but tricked into like contemplating what they are trying to talk about. And I appreciate that from both authors because in this one we have an exaggerated take on Black Friday. Obviously, this could have happened maybe back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. There's definitely been cases of people being trampled for a Cabbage Patch doll or a Tickle Me Elmo. Not anymore, not like the good days. You just shop online. There's no violence on Black Friday anymore. But he uses a mix of gore and humor to disarm the reader and create a space where you're invited to reflect on your own conclusions on consumerism and all of the other things, just like George Saunders does. And you can also read it. I'm going to stop comparing him to George Saunders because I don't want to do that. But you can read it on a surface level and just for entertainment value only because it's entertaining. It's funny. It's a little gross. Or you can continue to unpack each of the topics and all of the themes and see like, well, what's he getting at here? But he leaves it up to you. I don't think this author or George Saunders sort of puts a judgment into their stories. I think he is like leaving it up to us to say like how do we feel about this. And I will say I had to look it up because I was like this retail stuff is too real life. Like I worked in retail for 12 years, I know exactly how this works. And I was like, no, he worked in retail, there's no way. He knows how to, he's making little notes. There's like one line he says that I think it's duo that it's like, oh, and he even helps unpack shipment. And I was like, mm-hmm. I know exactly what that means. We're speaking the same language.
That is great, Joey. And I was wondering if you were going to bring your retail experience into this, because one of the things that I thought was really interesting, this also had the vibes of a zombie horror flick. Like these people in the story, as depicted, the consumers, are out of their minds. Some of them can no longer speak. They're just like, like pointing at stuff. They have totally lost their minds through this retail frenzy. One lady falls down, breaks her neck, and the lady next to her rips a pair of jeans out of her dead cold hands. Not even cold because she just died 30 seconds ago. And I was like, this feels like Shaun of the Dead. Like, this just feels like a zombie romp. Like, what
Yeah.
happens when crazy people take over the mall? And I really found that funny in on one hand and extremely depressing and sad, and all the empathy came out for me of
Yeah.
like, oh, you poor people who are like sucked into consumerism. Oh, you poor workers who have to, like, one guy's job is to bring the dolly over to collect the dead bodies to put them in the spot on the sales floor that they have, like, or in the back that they're like, oh, well, this is where we keep the bodies because there will be
Mhm.
bodies. I was like, wait a minute, this is retail, folks. Like, this is not supposed to be, we slash prices, not people. So like it was just a
We
really
slash.
It's
Price.
just a really weird feeling. So, Joey, I don't want to take us in too many directions to start, but there's so much in the story. And as you said, it's like read it straight, read it just as what it is, and take nothing from it if you want. Or you can unpack each and every dimension that he casually throws out there for you to go, what was that about? About identity and belonging and language and consumerism and economic disadvantage and all of it, Joe. That's like the start of the list. But I would
Yeah.
love to hear I'd love to hear where you're going with that, Joey.
There are a million things to talk about, and it's such a short story. It's only like 25 pages in the audiobook. The ebook, which there's small pages anyway, so it's probably not that long. But yeah, I would say unfortunately a lot of the things he was talking about in terms of what is reality for retail is real. Like, I mean, I've never seen someone stab a child in the face with a heel of her a high heel, but I wouldn't put it past people. Um, he does in this collection, he writes a little bit more about retail that I've read so far. And there are some harsh realities of things that happen, especially in malls, when it's not great, like people jumping off high floors to commit suicide. That has definitely happened in one of the malls I worked in it a few times. So it happens. It's unfortunate, but yes, he is at least he's worked in a mall, and I could tell you that. So, yeah, but you were talking about the consumerism of it, which George Saunders also does talk about this, and it's a fun topic for me to talk about because it's something that is so ubiquitous within our culture, and I will keep that to the United States, because when you read the story, you're like, no, no, no one would do that. Nobody would do that. And then you're like, wait a minute. People were standing outside in line not too long ago now for those Stanley Cup, and they were outside all night waiting in the elements. Hopefully it was nice out. And then they rushed in like the old days of Black Friday to go. And it wasn't even on sale. It was just because it was a limited edition item. But
And they were fighting in the stores. Like I saw a newsreel about that.
yeah.
And Joey, I just want to give you one note on that. Yes, I did learn from you that when you were talking about the Stanley Cup, it was not famous hockey
Not hockey.
competition. And I just saw something today. Somebody posted a whole line of Stanley Cups back at the Restore, at the Goodwill, at the Salvation Army, at
Yeah.
the secondhand store. And they're like, this is exactly where they belonged in the first place. And you can see that very quick cycle of life. And that made um, a very pointed note about consumerism, which is exactly where we go in this story.
I think you can kind of you get a better sense of the predatory nature of Black Friday because these are shoppers who normally cannot afford to buy these items, which is the lady with the TV. Like, she can't afford these things normally. She ends up losing her family, like they're killed. And she's like, well, they're weak. So that's okay. But you're getting shoppers who sort of are here only out of necessity. And it really relates to the Langston Hughes story from last week a little bit because we have the kid Roger who tries to snatch Mrs. Jones' purse to get money to get blue suede shoes. And I'm assuming that it was to keep up with the trend that Elvis had set with his song. So we can see something like that that's happening now is where people are rushing to these stores to get these very close to reality name brands that he'll intentionally put TM on it to be like they want the brand. This is not they're not here because they're suffering because they're cold, they don't have a coat. It's because they want this pole face, which is obviously North Face. It's like they want the status symbol and not the item itself. And it's just like, you're keeping up with the Joneses, but you're never going to be able to keep up with people that have too much money that are never going to be, you're never going to be a part of that group. And it makes me think of there's a lot of conversation happening right now in public discourse about class consciousness because there is this lie, I think, that a lot of young people are told that if you just work hard, you'll be rich one day. Just do what you're supposed to do, stay in line, and you will get as much money, more money than you could ever spend. And you're like, no, Oh, that's not how wealth works. But thank you anyway. So,
Thanks for that story you just told me
yeah.
by rich people who control all the things. Yes, please continue to do that so I can be enriched. And Joey, I just wanted to say one thing about this class consciousness and this consumerism. I think in this story, he did a great job of showing it was children, it was moms, it was a
Mhm.
guy who said, like, I'm executive vice president, or he had some management job. So it was cutting across all different types of people in all different socioeconomic places, but they were signaling their quote unquote affluence or their brand identity by purchasing these items. And I just thought that was a really interesting way to approach this, that this infection of consumerism cut through all slices of society.
Yeah, I think describing it as sort of like a zombie apocalypse, all of these three threads or topics that we've just discussed, like all come, they are all connected for me. Where, and what story we're talking about? Oh, N.K. Jemisin, the ones who stay and fight, where she was saying like the infection that spreads that they have to exterminate. And I said like, oh, I think it's greed or whatever. So that is like, I'm seeing a connection again here of like, this is the infection that zombifies them. They're now the undead because they're so driven by greed to try and gain that affluence and that social status and something that they're never going to get. I mean, it's a harsh reality that most of us, most Americans, are closer to experiencing homelessness than you are being a part of the 1%. That's reality. I'm never going to have billions of dollars, and I also don't want them. Idea that we're constantly chasing to keep up with these trends, and you can see the aftermath as you explained that the Stanley Cups end up in Goodwills or secondhand stores because first of all Stanley came out and said that they use lead when they make them, so probably not great to use when you're drinking out of it. But yeah, it's just all of these things are tied together. They're just like losing their shit over stupid stuff.
Yeah, Joey, and I appreciate that you said I just pulled to the section where we meet that mom, her daughter, and her husband in the retail store, the clothing store. So it says, us, us. She's like trying to signal to the guy. The woman with the gray scarf says, she has large gold earrings hanging off the sides of her head. The pink coat child is at her shins. The child's face is bruised, but she isn't crying at all. So this was the kid who got knocked down earlier. Can't. The Stewie, Gray Scarf's husband says. Family time needs 42-inch high def. The buy Stewie deal is only while supplies last. Can't afford any other day. And one might argue you can't afford it today either,
Yeah.
because this one day isn't Magic Fairy Dust Day where things no longer cost anything. That, as you said, the quote unquote real cost of this giant 42-inch high def TV for her is the loss of her daughter and her husband. And as you said, I highlighted that section where she was like, they were just weak. I am strong. I'm like, you, ma'am, are an idiot because your husband and daughter were just murdered by the crowd so you could have a TV for family night, but you don't have a family anymore. So enjoy your TV, but everything prior to this has been destroyed because of the thing that you wanted to acquire.
Is it worth it for first of all, 42-inch TV is not that big. Okay, I don't know, that doesn't feel like a huge TV to me. But this thought I was having is like, what happens? And I talked about this quite a bit. That when you have like a scarcity mindset of I don't have enough, I don't have whether that's you don't have enough food to eat, you don't have enough clothing to keep yourself safe from the elements, you don't have enough shelter or it's not reliable, you don't have reliable transportation, whatever that might be, and it triggers the scarcity mindset. It's you lose a slice of your humanity, unfortunately, and that's not a dig at anybody that's experiencing that. I have experienced that plenty of times where you just don't have enough money because of the stupid system here. Okay. So, but you can see what is happening to these consumers, these shoppers, when they have this idea that we can't do this any other time. Like, if we want this TV, we have to strike while the iron is hot. We have to do what it takes to get to this TV. And it's like, well, but like for what? What purpose? Because as you just read, she loses her family. So it's like, what, what are you gonna do now? You have this TV and no one to watch it with.
Yeah, Joey, I appreciate that you took us there because one of the things the author did a great job of doing is not only this physical lack of resources, they lack empathy, they lack connection, they are trying to get status, right? So there are these big emotional buckets that are empty that they think that they're going to get filled by these material goods. And I just thought that was really interesting. And it was not lost on either of us that the store was called Prominent, right? It's like it is in your face. What kind of mall is it? It's the Prominent Mall. So I
Mhm.
live near the King of Prussia Mall, the second largest mall in America. So like that made me chuckle because I'm like, oh yeah, that thing is a force to be reckoned with. And I appreciated the fact that they do reference religion obliquely in this story because as you said, it's like, in what society do you take a high-heeled shoe and whack a kid on his cheek and leave him bloody mark because you're trying to get a piece of clothing on sale? Like, that's not the world I want to live in. But I want to just read this short paragraph to give the listeners a little taste of this author's style. So, outside the store, the Prominent is bloody and broken. So, I can tell it's been a great Black Friday. There are people strung out over benches and feet poking out of trash bins. Christmas music you can't escape plays from speakers you cannot see. Christmas is God here. And I just loved that he assaults our senses so you can see in your mind's eye feet hanging out the top of one of these mall dumpster receptacle bins. And yeah, when you're in the mall, there's always music. I've never seen a speaker in the mall, but I know it's
Yeah, who
there.
did?
And so I was like, it's there. And that Christmas is God here. So he's not talking about organized religion. He's talking about mass consumerism that has risen to this frenzy that literally makes people go insane. Like no sane person is going to push a kid down or grab a pair of jeans out of a woman who just fell down dead in front of you. Like that is not normal behavior.
I mean, working in retail, if someone did that, I would not be surprised. I would be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense that they did that. But I don't want to go through my retail trauma, although this was coming up when I was reading, I was like, oh my God, I'm right back at it. But you're talking about using material goods to sort of fill in this hole that you have this metaphorical hole. Even though the narrator does have a hole in his arm because he had a bite taken out of it, which further supports the zombie narrative. I want to talk about the idea that he is so motivated to win this sales competition, not only for bragging, right? But because he wants to win the jacket so he can give it to his mother. Because it's a $500 jacket. And he specifically says he makes $8.50, or yeah, $8.50 an hour. So in 5 hours, he makes like $7,500 for the store. But in that same 5 hours, he earned less than $50. That's a disparity. I mean, come on. That's not good. But anyway, he
Joey,
said,
can you follow up on that? Sorry,
go
because
ahead, go
he
ahead.
did say in one of the years when they had a different sales manager, she gave them a percentage of the sales that day as an incentive. So he made a lot
Mhm.
of bank once, and they're like, oh, yeah, we as a
Yeah,
corporation
oops.
never did that again. Like, what the heck? And I thought that was just a beautiful thank you for sort of doing the math for us. I'm like, oh, if he wins the days or the month sales competition, he will get access to a $500 retail, right? It's a $42 jacket that they're selling for $500.
Yeah.
That his what his wage was, and I really appreciate that. And you were on the road to somewhere else, but I just could not say they did try a different system. They did try a different system to,
Yeah.
share in the profits with the employees, and somebody shut that down after the first round.
Yeah, they're like, why would I share my profits? Those are mine. Anyway, yes, I was talking about the jacket that he's gonna win if he wins the competition. So he says, soon I'll have a $500 jacket as proof to my mother that I'll love her forever. When I imagine how her face will look as I give it to her, my heart beats faster. First of all, heartbreaking because he wants to give his mother something back. And he does talk about his family in the story, that they are experiencing some hard times. They're having a hard time making ends meet. They're not celebrating holidays. And there's a lot of tension in the family, which makes a lot of sense. If your finances are not adding up, unfortunately, it's gonna cause tension for everyone. But parallels the story because he is trying to do the same thing. He's trying to earn it in a different way. He's not going out and purchasing it with his own money, but he is working hard to give someone a gift in his family to prove that he loves them. And I like you were just talking about how he's saying Christmas is God. It's like, well, why I this is why I don't like Christmas. Side tangent. I don't like Christmas because I don't like giving people gifts out of obligation. If I want to give you a gift, I'll just give you one.
I'm aware of that as a recipient of gifts from Joey. So yes,
Yeah.
it not is not tied to a holiday. And Joey, I want to take you
Yeah.
back to that very specific quote because when you took us back to the $8.50, that was significant. They were talking about Thanksgiving. I'd offered to help with some of the shopping. My mom had lost her job. I make 8.50 an hour, but I saved. Mom, dad, sister, and me. But then we skip the whole thing because we don't really like one another anymore. That was one side effect of lean living. We used to play games together. Now my parents yell about money. And so it was that sad deterioration of like, we used to be a happy family that wanted to have Thanksgiving together. And now the financial pressures are so much that we're like, I don't even like you. Like, if I'm going to spend money, I'm not going to spend money on you. And that was just echoed layers of sadness because he's falling into that economic trap of, oh, if I give my mom the best jacket in the entire store, she's going to know that I love her forever. I'm like, my mom knew that I loved her forever, and I did not need to purchase any item in any store to show her that. And so it's just this sadness. And he makes another comment about someone when that jacket had to get given up to save a coworker's life. There's only one blue jacket, a size medium of the premium jacket that he was holding in reserve for his mom. Angela, who seems to be like a less fierce competitor slash sales clerk, she was in over her head. And the main character comes back and is like, oh my gosh, I'll sacrifice my mom's jacket so you can live, so this customer doesn't like rip you limb from limb. And he makes a comment about that customer now that she has this jacket. It's not going to fill her loneliness. It's not going to gain her friends. And he was like, good luck with your jacket. And she's like, oh, thank you very much. And she runs off to the register. And I just layer upon layer of saying, what in the world have we done to ourselves and each other in this completely senseless way? But as you had talked about earlier, about basic human needs for shelter and food and meaningful work, he's just throwing that right out there and saying, these are legit human needs. We totally get it. We all have them. But why are we choosing this unsustainable, economically ridiculous, environmentally unsustainable thing? Why are we doing this still? And it's his fourth year. So it's not like he didn't know what to expect. And I thought that was also
Hmm.
a minor Christmas miracle. I'm like, oh my goodness, you survived 4 holiday seasons in retail. Bless you.
I I survived 12. So he can call me when he's been around the block a little more. I wanted to talk about more about the conversation where he has a conversation with Duo after Duo quits, which I mean, that happens all the time. It's Black Friday, people can't hang, and then they walk out and they never come back, and you're like, no, I get it. I get it. It was not nice here today. But he has this interaction with Duo as he's getting called back off of his break, which, oh my God, that's so annoying. But anyway, he sees Duo and he says, it's a nice coat, he says, but that's it. What? The coat isn't proof. She knows. You don't need it. You don't need to, bro, he says, turning around and rising up the escalator. Don't do that to me. Don't do that, I say, not to me. Sorry. Yeah, I say, and then Dua flies away. So it's a very sparse conversation. You obviously would need context, otherwise you don't know what they're talking about. But Duo has this different sense that really doesn't fit in with the goal of the store. There
The
you go.
ethos.
Yeah, yeah. He sees it very differently. It's just a very tender moment between the narrator, who is unnamed, and Duo, when he's saying like, you don't need to work this hard for the coat. Like, your mom already knows that she loves you. And I think that's the author's way of saying to all of us, the readers, like, no, you don't measure your love for someone in the material or monetary goods that you are gifting them. Like, that's not having a million presents on Christmas. If you celebrate Christmas, doesn't mean that you love your kids anymore, or your anyone in your family, or your spouse, your significant other. Doesn't that does not those things do not align. You can someone could have a lot of money, buy you a lot of gifts, and be a real piece of shit. So it doesn't make sense, but I love the message that he's trying to get through to us. Is like, look how ridiculous this is. Look how stupid this is. You want to be like this? Don't be like this.
Even Duo could figure it out. So I love
Yeah.
the fact. Can we talk about Duo and the main characters, their relationship prior to this? Because I thought there was something really interesting about that, and very interesting that his name is Duo. He's the only person in this narrative that has kind of a non-standard name. We'll just say that. For those who are named that as non-standard. So here's the description of Duo. He wears a t-shirt and skinny jeans, like most of our customers his age. Angela tells him to watch me, to learn from me. She says he's my heir apparent. I like him, but he's not like me. He can sound honest. He knows how to see what people want, but he can't do what I do. And I'm bringing this up because there's another part in the story where Duo, is in the jeans department and he's trying to do his job. And the narrator, main character, comes over. And I just want to read this quote. Main character is like, Angela thinks this guy is like me, but he is so not like me. Like, I am very different. So the narrator says, I moved to sling him one of the slim straights in his size. He thinks it'll make him popular at school, but stop because of how quickly Duo tosses the right kind of jeans to the customer, who takes them and limps to the register. Do you understand them? I ask. Now I do, Duo says. He kicks a tooth that's lying on the ground. And so I think it was that moment for the narrator to be like, oh, I thought I was like all that, and I have these special skills, and he can't keep up with me. But Duo can intuit that this guy picked up the wrong, those jeans are not for you, portly man. You can't have skinny straight. You need to have a different kind of jean. And he intuits this. He gives the guy the right pair of jeans, and off everybody goes. And I love that moment when we often say, do these characters grow? Do we have some sort of arc? And I was like, the main character is like, oh, there is a skill to what you do that is different than the skill that I have. And I just really love that moment of humility and recognition that others, even if they're not like us, can still bring something extremely valuable and unique to that experience. So I was just like, yes, thank you for adding that little moral story in there.
But there is one detail to that instance or that scene with Duo. So the part that I wanted you to continue reading, or that I'll continue reading, says, now I do, Duo says. He kicks out a tooth lying on the ground. Then he shows me a small bloody mark in the space between his thumb and forefinger. So he was bitten by one of the shoppers, which that's how the main character, the narrator, he was also bitten by one of the shoppers. And so if we think about it like a zombie virus, that is how they're now knowing how to communicate with these consumers, is because they were infected with a little bit of their greedy virus, so to speak. So I think it's funny that they both are able to do that communication, like you were saying, because they had to have a physical, personal reaction, a relationship with these customers.
And Joey, I love that just when you said that, I'm like, oh, where else did we see some kind of weird virus thing going on? Oh, The Road Virus Travels North by Stephen King, right? We didn't know how that was infecting people and making this crazy madness with this painting.
We still don't.
We still don't. I'm still saying it's hallucinogenic contact peyote mushrooms, but that's just my fantasy
I
world where
wouldn't
we're all
put
living
past
in.
Stephen King
Like,
for
that's a
that.
thing. That's a thing. And I love the use of language. So if we can just talk about that for just a moment. So Duo says, my break is after yours, Duo says. That's retail for hurry up, I'm hungry, right? And so he talks about
Yes.
these different things of language. And he says, I punch my username and password into the computer, and Richard bows down to me like I'm to be worshiped. Angela nods at me like a proud mama. And so we have these ideas about identity and how you get your self-worth, and they're making fun of the customers like suckers, like you think you're going to get like acceptance in your social group because you're wearing this $400 $500 jacket or the right jeans. Nobody's going to fall for that. But what did he just fall for? Like his coworkers are like, you're the man, look how much you sold, like you've got this. And he's like, he's getting his self-esteem from other people as well. So it's like, isn't that interesting? I just find that super interesting to contemplate. Where do we get our idea of self-worth? And Joey, I want to say one last thing about Duo and the main character. We do hear that there's like a little sickle, half moon shape on Duo's arm.
Mhm.
Sorry, on the main character's arm when he was bitten. And I think that might have happened his first. We have 4 separate years that he recounts incidents from. That might have been his first year. I'm not certain on that. Duo, this is his first time because he's like, this guy just started. And he was like, oh no, this is a boundary for me. If you are going to bite me at my job and draw blood, I think I need to leave. I think this isn't the right thing for me. And I just really loved that clear line in the sand of like, I'm not, I'm not doing this, guys. Not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I've never
For
been
850 an
bitten.
hour, I'm really afraid I'm not
Yeah.
literally risking life and limb to complete my job.
Side note, this doesn't really have to do with the text itself, but in retail managers especially are expected to literally put their lives on the line for those clothes. Just saying, okay? If you know, you know. If you know, you know, okay? I have been in some very bad situations because I really didn't have a choice. I had to protect the merchandise and the people that were inside.
And Joey, that to me is just so ludicrous. I get if you're a first responder. I get if you are police.
Yeah.
I get if you are running into a burning building. I even get that doctors and lawyers have to sometimes deal with irate situations. But seriously, over a pair of jeans, I really don't think you should be risking your life for that. And it's just such a sad commentary on what? Like what? And I was like, okay, I think a lot of people have over the last 10 years sort of gotten a little down on online shopping. And it's like, oh, that's like, it's just making us even more materialistic. But at least, as you said at the start of the show, nobody gets killed or trampled to death, including the Amazon, UPS, or FedEx drivers who are beating a path to my door. No one gets trampled as a result of online shopping.
That's true. No one's ever tried to trample me. Lots of other things, but not that.
Can we talk at some point about Wendy and the poison pie? I found that so funny, but you know me, I'm from the Midwest. If I had to work on Thanksgiving, I too would have brought you a pie and I would have said, hey, everybody, this is so great. I know it sucks that we're not home with our families, and I know you don't like your family anyway, so maybe it's better that you're here with me, that I would bring the pie. I would be so excited to share a little bit of hospitality, a little bit of fun. But Wendy had her own agenda. And the main character was smart enough to be like, she's trying a little too hard to get me to eat this pie. And he makes a statement that he said, I will never eat anything that someone is trying to shove down my throat. And I'm like, oh, contraire, mon frere, you definitely are taking consumerism. Your worth is in dollars. You need popular clothes to be a good person. You bought that hook, line, and sinker. You are part of that industrial complex. So I thought it was very funny that he uses the phrase, I won't accept anything that someone is trying to jam down my throat. I'm like, accept all of the cultural values that you are now supporting and being the victim of. Just an FYI. Just thought that was
Yeah.
interesting. And I will just say the one thing about Wendy, because I'd love people to read the story, but it says, who knows what she put in the pie? I made it my mission to beat her, and I did. I squashed her. Maybe it was because, thanks to her biological warfare, I had shoes, graphic tees, hats, pot, plus denim to cover while she was stuck in pole face. So like her, and then he said by New Year's, she was gone, right? So her tactics of poisoning her underlings and coworkers didn't quite work out.
Yeah, that's messed up. I will say I've never seen someone do that, but shady stuff to get your sales numbers up, 100%. Unfortunately, this is very triggering at some moments. Where I'm like, oh my God, I can't go back there. No. Like you wake
Joey, we
up
should
from a
go
nightmare.
shopping to
No,
manage our emotions. We totally should have some
no.
retail therapy. This is going to help.
No, I'll be an online shopper. Funny that he's like, I refuse to eat this pie, even though I'm eating up everything else. But it's I'm not sitting on my high horse over here. I'm not putting myself on a pedestal. I'm guilty of doing the same things. Not recently, but definitely when I was younger, we're being like chasing trends, especially fashion trends. And working in a store doesn't help because then you're like, oh, that's nice. Should I get that? And you're like, oh, I have a discount, so I should get that. So yeah, it's unfortunate that he was so accurate with all of these retail descriptions because I'm sure people are like, no one would do that. Nobody would do that.
So Joey,
Yeah, no one needs to know that.
one of the things, Joey, that I found the funniest scene, and I could totally envision it in thinking about how ridiculous this man looked. He says, Coca-Cola, bubble, small, me, coal. A man says while beating his chest, I'm the only one at work who doesn't have a coal meister. How can I be a senior advisor without one? The only one. And I'm like, oh my God. Are you in charge of other humans? Are you an adult? Are you truly beating your chest and using non sequitur sentences and just shouting out words and saying, I'm the only one who doesn't have this jacket? How can it be? I was like, sad, relatable, very interesting that he had this quote unquote like powerful man in industry acting like a 2-year-old child. Mommy, mommy, I want a treat and you better give me one because everyone else has one. And it's like, oh my God, thank you for putting this ridiculous man in this story, but also super relatable because no one wants to be out of their social group, right? You don't want to be the only kid who doesn't have the light blue Nikes from 1984. So even though we were poor, we found a way to give me those shoes. And I still, 40 years later, remember those beautiful shoes. So Joey, I get it. When we were talking
You should have that.
last week, when we were talking about the blue suede shoes, I was like, I get it. I think possibly everyone can relate to the idea of wanting to have the signifier that your social group had, especially in your adolescence. I think we're especially prone. And the fact that he put a senior advisor, which is obviously not a 15-year-old boy, in that same situation, I think it asks us to think about human nature and maturity and our value systems.
I think the language piece is really something that interests me a lot in this story. We've been talking about that now, that there is this weird dichotomy between this. I swear it's going to tie back into it. Give me one second. There is this dichotomy between the need to be an individual in the United States, part of our culture to be very individualistic. And it's to our detriment, I would say. But we always want to be like the one who stands out. We don't want to blend in with the crowd, and I get it, okay? But then we also have this collective mindset where we're like, but I want to have what you all have. I want to be the same as all of you, but I'll take my Stanley Cup, but mine should be green and yours can be yellow or something like that. So it's just this weird dynamic that we have as a society in the United States. Again, I'll keep it to the United States. How do we reconcile these two things? And what ends up happening is that we can feel kind of isolated because when we don't have the things to keep up with the Joneses kind of thing. And this loss of language from these customers helps to isolate them and disconnect them even more. And that's where I'm coming back, okay? It's like, how do we function with one another when we don't understand one another? And that's why I liked that he talks about the narrator and duo both have a physical interaction with these customers, that's when they're able to understand them. So, and I'm not saying, oh, you should let people bite you or tear a hole into your arm or something, but like they have to take the time to have a one-on-one interaction. Hopefully, it's just a conversation with someone to get them to know them enough to be able to understand them and to bridge that gap, that language gap. And it's not like they don't speak the same languages, and maybe that's the issue. They just need someone to be able to translate. It's that these consumers and these customers just are losing their ability to speak and articulate and express what they're looking for without it having to be decoded. And I thought that was like such an interesting thing to insert is like in a space, it's just desire. It's people who are coming in here because they desire something that they don't have and they cannot articulate that. And that feels like a very frustrating thing as well, from the consumer perspective as well, that you cannot, you need this thing, but you don't know how to say it. And that's, I don't like that. I mean, I like that he wrote it and he did he did a good job on it, but it's frustrating, like, to think about as a thought experiment.
Joey, I appreciate that you brought us back to Duo and the main character because Angela said, you guys are a lot alike. And the main character is like, I'm not anything like this punk. Like, he wears skinny jeans, he's brand new, I can do things he can't. But your moment of empathy that you showed us by taking us to the point, they both lived through this crazy first part of their shift. They both literally have blood wounds on their body. I now have a scar that I will carry with me physically forever because of my job, that they were able to relate to each other in a very intimate way to be like, wait, maybe we do share something really fundamental. And I thought, okay, well, he's showing us about empathy. And like, if you have a real connection with someone on whatever level it is, it's the start of a bit of understanding. And it's like, but no, it's not, Jennifer, because those crazy nonverbal zombie customers, they all have the same goal, which is to win the thing that they want. Like they are getting in there, claws out, poking people, knocking kids over. You'd think they had a shared goal. They had shared expectations. They thought this was going to make their lives better, that somehow they'd have empathy for each other. But they're like, oh, hell no. Like, out of the way, every man for himself. I know you want this as much as I want it, but I'm bigger than you. So I'm going to get it. Or I'm more vicious than you. Or I will whack a kid in the head with my high heel to get the thing that I want. Or grab
Yeah.
something out of somebody's dead hand. So it's just an interesting question about self-knowledge, empathy. And when you were talking a little bit earlier about sort of rugged American idealism, like we are all individuals, like we came to this, our forefathers came to this country because they did not want anyone telling them what to do. They wanted the freedom to be themselves. And being ourselves in some way means being exactly like our neighbor, but just slightly better. My stuff has to just be slightly better than yours. I'm like, well, isn't that an interesting paradox? And I think a lot about authenticity. Like, how do you be your true self? If is it really fundamentally wired into our coding in our brains to need to mirror other people and compete in that way? Or is that a social construct that we have just made up to fill in these emotional gaps that people have about self-esteem and compassion and empathy and understanding? It's a very interesting psychological rabbit hole to go down. And maybe
Yeah, it
I'm getting a
is.
little deep, but I want to say one last thing about language. Adeji-Brenyah, I love the fact that he often uses language in a very weird way. So I will just recount the last thing that I would like to say about Duo and the main character. Looks like you've had it pretty crazy, I say to Duo. There are jeans everywhere, none of them folded, blood stains all over the floor. And so you think you're reading just this nice, normal story. And then I'm like, wait, okay, we're at the Gap. There are jeans everywhere. They're not folded. Wait, there's blood stains on the floor? Like, what universe is this? That was the thing that really echoed for me of the George Saunder-esque-ness of this story, that I was like, oh yeah, he would totally do that. When we're talking about the Semplica girls, we're like, oh yeah, everybody has girls strung up by their heads on platforms in their yard. Why not? I'm like, dude, that's messed up. And so I really appreciate the dude, that's messed up quality of the story, that
Yeah.
you're just going along and you're like, wait, bloodstains on the floor at the Gap? I don't think so. I'm sorry, it
I,
wasn't the Gap, a retail establishment. Don't
yeah,
sue
it was
me.
unnamed.
Don't
But
sue me,
yeah,
guys.
again, this was not shocking to me. I have found blood on the floor. I've had to trace it back to the person it came from. So like to me, you can't shock me if it's a retail thing, and no, I've seen it probably, and I've probably had to deal with it. But you were talking about how they both are marked. They have a physical mark now. I was not bitten, but I do have a scar on my thumb from working in retail. So it was not from a customer though. It was from a rusty piece of metal that went right into my thumb.
I would like to say, Joey, that this has been a delight. And I love that you are reading his novel. And I am going to, again, like last week, I'm going to throw down the challenge that sometime in 2025, you and I will both read that book and it's the Chain Gang All Stars, correct?
Hmm.
And we
Yeah.
will read that book and we will do a podcast episode on it because I am so excited about this writer, this beautiful new voice that is both familiar and completely foreign to me. So, really excited about that.
Next week, we're reading Blood Child by Octavia E. Butler, who is a very well known and well loved science fiction and fantasy author. And I'm very excited because I've read it and it's fantastic. And I think it's a great short story that everyone should read. And I'm so excited to talk about it.
Thank you for listening to the Extra Literary Affairs podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's discussion. And don't worry, it'll be our little secret you stepped out of your literary comfort zone. Check out our link tree to follow us on TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, and Storygraph.